y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the VRNation Station podcast. Today, I have Tera Lorimer with me. I'm very excited about today's topic because it hits home. I will tell you why it hits home in a little bit. But Tera, who's actually one of the fortunate people and a good friend, fortunate for me, who's actually been successful dealing with refunds and with chargebacks. So today's topic is going to be discussing chargebacks and refunds in the STR space, as well as cancellation policies, things like that are going to affect these refunds, and then maybe just a general feel around the industry. But first, Tera, welcome back to the podcast. I think folks know who you are, but why don't you just go ahead and reintroduce yourself just so they're aware.
Hi, Jamie. Good afternoon. It's good to see you again. My name is Tera Lorimer. I'm the founder of Luxury Getaways. I started my company in 2008 up in the Pacific Northwest. We currently operate at Mount Baker, a ski resort, and in the outskirts of the Phoenix area in Arizona. I'm also the vice president of VRNation, our short-term rental association, and I'm happy to be here.
I am pretty excited to hear about this because you haven't actually shared with me how you pulled it off. But let's start off with just some basic things for people who are basic like me. What's the difference between a chargeback and a refund, in your words?
A chargeback is when you're contacted by the credit card company or your merchant. In this case, I use Lynbrook, and a dispute has been filed. And typically it's for a disgruntled guest or an issue that happened. Most often you'll get a notice that you have 7 days to respond. The money comes out of your account immediately. And then a determination is made shortly after you respond, if you respond after 7 days. They have up to 90 days to respond and put the money back into your account if you win the dispute. That is typical of a chargeback. And then a refund is before you go to chargeback status. If you have a dispute with a guest or any issues, you can elect to give them a partial refund for consideration for any problems they had, such as the hot tub went down and you're going to give them back $50 or $100 credit, or cleaning issues or something like that. Typically that happens, 80 or 90% of the time prior to any chargeback complaints.
Got it. So the normal flow of things would be a refund request would come through previous to a chargeback.
Typically, you're having a conversation with the guest, and if they're complaining and you're going back and forth and trying to solve it for them, or if there's just something like a hot tub has gone down or something like that you can't fix immediately, then you can offer them some sort of a compensation or credit to come back, a small refund or something like that to keep them happy. And if they're just truly not happy and they don't like your answers, they will file a chargeback with their credit card company because they think that's the best way to go, and the credit card company is going to protect them. In many
Right.
cases, they do. I've lost before, and the most recent one I just had last month, I won. But yeah, we try to dot our I's and cross our T's to make sure it doesn't come to where we're running with losses.
So got it. Now the question of the day, and this is something that's kind of more near and dear to my heart because I literally just had a conversation on one of these that came through for us. Have you ever faced like a fraudulent one? Like one that you just know is flat out fraudulent, and how did you manage through and disputing the fraudulent chargeback? What did it look like? What was the basis of it?
The most recent one I had was, unfortunately, was Amex. I think Amex is the most difficult. They typically side with their client or the customer first. So they're the hardest to dispute versus Visa and MasterCard. In my eyes, it was fraudulent. They stayed the entire weekend. They stayed Memorial weekend. And they did have a small issue with a shower in a brand new home. We had just finished construction 60 days prior to, so it was a new home to us. And they claimed that services were withheld or canceled. So I had 7 days to dispute it. And then Amex, once I filed my response, Amex says, we'll decide within 90 days. Well, in that time frame, I had already paid out my owner. So it was, okay, I need to, cover all my bases and make sure that beyond all reasonable doubt, I've done my best to get this money back. So it took about 2 weeks, and I wrote out everything that happened over the weekend, every time they contacted us, and popped it into Chat GPT and said, I want an unbiased response for this chargeback rebuttal with Amex. Take out the emotions, take out the fluff, put it into a summary format and just the facts. And it was unbelievable. Chat gave me back a summary, a key timeline and evidence, guest complaint and resolution, refund request communication, and a final conclusion. And everything was in a bullet point. Everything was just simply a fact. I took everything else out of it, and I submitted the 2 or 3 pages along with the signed rental agreement. We require all guests to e-sign a rental agreement. If you don't have that, you won't win anything. All text communication and screenshots to everything they said, proof that they had stayed there. They were in the home. They sent pictures. I responded immediately every time they contacted us. Every time they did ask for a refund, but we determined that whatever the issue they had was guest cause. So I did not issue a refund, which then upset them. And then 2 weeks later, they went and filed a chargeback with Amex, thinking that Amex is going to side with them. So we ended up winning. I stated the facts, provided the documents, and they did side with us, as they should have. I mean, the guests had a great weekend. They stayed in a brand new home. It was
Right. Have there been any other kickbacks out of that? Any other lashback, bad review, Better Business Bureau, or anything like that?
not yet. They were a direct book. So it wasn't an Airbnb or VRBO or another platform where they could leave a review online. They still could leave a review with Google or something like that, which I can't help and prevent. All I can do is just write an honest response if they do that.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. So if in your past, like what are your, I guess, most common reasons why guests would actually ask for a refund? What's been your past?
But a majority of my properties are near a ski resort. So the number one thing people want in the wintertime is a hot tub. And they get cranky when the hot tub doesn't work. Now, 99.9% of the time, all of our hot tubs work, but occasionally things break down, especially being in extreme temperatures in remote areas in the middle of nowhere. It's the most opportune time for a hot tub to break. So always on a Friday at 5 o'clock. Typically with me, it's hot tub issues or something like that. We try to resolve them the best we can, and we try to take care of the guests. We have hot tub techs on staff that can solve a majority of problems, but just sometimes things go down and I need a new pump or I need a new circuit board or topside control, and that's just, unfortunate. So I typically apologize, do the best we can to resolve it, and then we elect to give them a $50 a day refund for every day of their stay for the amenity being down. And just, our apologies. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we do, the best to accommodate you. So I offer, typically, if they're cooperating and being respectful, then we offer them a $50 a day refund just so that we don't have issues afterwards with chargebacks or complaints or bad reviews that we didn't take care of them.
And you think that so the $50 a day generally helps? I mean, it's,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think your properties are similar to ours. I mean, you're still talking a couple $100 up to thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah, and
interesting.
sometimes they're happy with it, and sometimes they're like, "Nah, don't worry about it. It's the middle of summer. We're not gonna use it anyways." And then sometimes they're pretty, cranky. So and the $50 a day is the best we can do, and it's, a sign of goodwill, even though it doesn't make everybody happy. It's 80-90%.
Got it. Well, you were saying that I literally just did a little search on the top reasons of guests requesting a refund, and number one was cleanliness issues, which is funny. We've run into a bunch of stuff this year, which I don't know how best to even wrap my head around. Where I have guests that are claiming like cleans weren't done, and we have breezeway, so
Mhm.
our cleaners have to take pictures after they're done of the clean, and we'll have guests that are citing cleanliness issues. I had an argument, or I had somebody that came back today. It's an Airbnb guest, of course, and they're making these arguments about how there were two beds downstairs that weren't clean. They were soiled. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I talked to the cleaners. I'm just like, how did you miss two beds? And they're just like, I didn't miss two beds. Like, the pictures are in Breezeway. Take a look. You look at the beds are made. And you're just like, so now you have this he said, she said with these. And I just got another ping today from this guest because we went back to Airbnb, and they're just like, this place was very expensive. That it's more money than my family can afford. Like that type of comments. You're just like,
Being familiar with Airbnb's terms and conditions really helps. When people ask for money back or complain, either prior to checkout or prior to review, or if they engage Airbnb support for an issue, we're pretty good at, documenting and defending ourselves if there is issues. Very rarely do we have any false claims. If there is, this weekend I had cobwebs. I had cobwebs above the fridge, between the fridge and the cabinet. Very minor. We apologized. I sent housekeeping back in. We took care of it right away. It was just, something little. I did not offer them a refund or anything like that. But I think as long as guests are being cooperative and somewhat kind, then they're easier to work with. If they're threatening a bad review or anything like that, and that's when I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Now we have a problem. And then I deal with them accordingly.
do you get requests for refunds while they're staying still?
Usually it's at the end of their stay. My biggest pet peeve is, and this just happened a couple days ago, again, it happens, I don't know, a few times a year, is we find out about all their complaints and all their issues in the review. When we even text them at 8 p.m., 4 hours after check-in, how is everything going? Is there anything you need? We're just checking in. And when we find out about issues in a review, when it's up to 14 days later, we can't solve their problems for them. Tub wasn't clean enough. There were pine needles in the bottom. You're in the middle of a national forest. Of course, there's pine needles in the hot tub from time to time. If there was cobwebs above the fridge, anything like that, we can address immediately.
Right.
We have staff on hand 7 days a week, and we can go in and take care of it or drain their hot tub or whatever they need. But it's very frustrating when you find out about something in a review. So we try to educate guests to reach out to us if they have a problem right away, either by text or email or phone call or whatever way of communication. Our office is open 6 days a week right here at the mountain so that we can take care of them before it becomes a problem or a complaint or the one thing they remember about the property instead of the whole weekend of, fun they had with their family, that there were
Right.
pine needles in the hot tub. So.
Right. Yeah. Which of course, that ruined my whole vacation.
I know.
I just can't handle. I can't handle two pine needles in my hot. I was like, shut up.
Open communication, being reasonable with guests, educating them on the type of environment they're in, whether there's mice or pests or mosquitoes or a national forest, or we have raccoons and all sorts of things up here. So I think staying in constant communication, educating the guests, and being reasonable with what
Right.
they're looking for, and help them the best you can. I try to walk a fine line of being fair, being reasonable, open communication, and then sometimes they're just fussy.
Right. Yeah. And I too, sometimes I try to put myself in the shoes of people and like, the angst that they feel. And I think sometimes especially in our properties, it's interesting because we get folks that come up and, we have a pretty broad variety of properties. We have smaller properties. We have, 2, 3, 4 bedroom properties that are very competitively priced, right? They're priced with the competitors in the area. And then we have some luxury properties that are very expensive. And we have people that come in and they want the luxury properties, and then they will search out something to try and make an argument for a refund on. And to me, it just boggles my mind. It's like, why would you come on a vacation and rent a property to try and get money back on it? It doesn't jive with the way I think and feel. And it's frustrating for me, for sure. I know that you feel the same way, but I look
Yeah.
at some of these other
Yeah,
reasons like
I
major
agree.
systems or appliance failures, pest infestations. We have, we're out in the middle of the desert for the most part. So we get, mice all the time, right? I mean, it depends on the time of the year. Yeah. Check-in problems and accessibility issues. We don't have too much of that. Safety and security concerns. We really don't have much of those at all. Excessive noise. That's very rare. Wi-Fi or utility outages. That's a different story too, because we have, especially in Island Park, it's always fun. Like, I'm not sure if who's leading the three blind mice in their digging structure when they're trying to fix water mains, but somehow they always seem to break it. It's like, gotta
Mhm.
call the guests because our water's out, and it's like through no fault of ours. They usually get it turned around and fixed pretty quickly, but we run into that. And I know that one of our early episodes that you're on, you talked about power outages that you guys deal with quite a bit. Do you refund off of a power outage or anything like that?
We take all power outage, winter storms, and those issues on a case-by-case basis. The terms and conditions for Airbnb say if a guest doesn't have power upon check-in, they don't have to check in and they don't have to pay. So it's optional if they want to handle it. Now, a lot of our properties now have generators because we have so many winter storms. We're at a ski resort, power goes out all the time. But I occasionally will offer a refund if they want to stick it out and live with the noise of a generator or see how long it's going to be. Let them. Sometimes we offer them a concession to come back at another time and enjoy the same property again. I think hearing them out and being fair and reasonable. Sometimes people can't check out because there's no other place to go and they've flown in, so they do have to kind of stick it out. We do have power outage kits in all of our properties, which helps a little bit with comfort, and it goes a little bit, in our favor that says, hey, we understand, we get it. Here's some lamps, heaters, flashlights, glow sticks for the kids, deck of cards to keep you entertained, a few creature comforts like that. So we do our best to mitigate issues.
Right.
But, if they get cold and they have to check out or they have a little one they're concerned about, then we totally understand. And sometimes we'll issue a one-night refund, but we try to balance it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, our rental agreement says no refunds. We don't control the weather, but, we understand
Right.
that things happen and we're all human and we do the best we can.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then the last two there is undisclosed host presence or rules, which obviously I don't think either of us deal with too much, or unpleasant odors, which
I don't have any unpleasant odors typically. One thing I wanted to bring up that we were talking about was fraud, because I think fraud is big these days, and a lot of people are getting reservations with either stolen credit cards, or I don't even know if they're authentic bookings. There's a particular OTA where they happen to come in on quite a bit, a very
Booking.com, you
specific
mean?
one. It also happens more in the bigger cities, like my Phoenix properties. It happens
Right.
10 to 1 than it does at my mountain resort properties.
That's a good point, because it happens to us in Tennessee, which is funny because I don't know the basis of it, but I know that one of the things that we know for sure is that if you're looking at fraudulent charges, and I don't understand how it's happening through B.com as much, but it is, and they are actively taking care of it or working on it. But there's some things that they can't control, like if we allow somebody to book, or there's a booking, but the card doesn't match the name of the person who signed the rental agreement. Those are the kind of things that if we take actions like that, it's hard for them to stop it, is kind of
Yeah.
what it boils down to. So there's a modicum of responsibility, I think, on both sides. But yeah, it seems to be distinctly through booking.com for some reason. I see that.
We haven't had any in 3 years. I did have quite a bit before that. We've learned to look out for red flags. Often can be longer same day bookings, names, credit cards, and signatures not matching between the rental agreement and their ID. We instituted, and it's only $3 per guest, so it makes total sense with us, a security check. We use Guest Ranger, and 9 times out of 10, if it's fraud, they won't fill out their Guest Ranger, which means they won't upload their ID or take a selfie, so we can't match them. And so it's an automatic decline unless there's an issue or we've had a face-to-face conversation with them. So we eliminated basically 100% of our fraud once we got a security check like Guest Ranger. I know there's 2 or 3 different companies out there. We also know now how to look out for fraud and red flags pretty quick. A lot of them are last minute same day bookings before the credit card is noticed to be used or stolen. And so they're often last minute. Sometimes they use a local address, or they don't have a zip code match or something like that. So typically we can pick up on them real fast. But once I hit a red flag and they won't fill out Guest Ranger, we automatically cancel.
Gotcha. So what was the fraud number or percentage that you hit before you're like, you know what, I got to do Guest Ranger. I got to bring it.
I had one reservation that was an $11,000 last minute booking on someone's credit card, and we didn't realize it was stolen. It was very last minute. They checked in the next day and left a mess in the house. And after that, I was like, after I was out $11,000, I said, we've got to do better than that. So we
Gotcha.
hired a Guest Ranger. They are integrated with our PMS software, and it's seamless now.
Interesting.
So it
Interesting.
was one big hard hit all at once. The only good thing is that it was at my own home that I own, my own vacation rental. So I didn't have to pay out an owner. I didn't have to explain anything to anybody. And I got lucky on that. It was my own butt that got hurt. So lesson learned. It won't happen again.
Yeah, that's okay. So interestingly enough, I mean, I just asked the question because there's so many different. I have to be cognizant of our sponsors and friends, but it's like there's so many softwares out there, right, to handle things that are similar. Like I think for every possible hurdle that we face as property managers, there's a software, and then its competitor shooting you an email about how to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, like, and it's one of those two. And I actually have an open ticket, I think, with Streamline, because we're a Streamline company. And it's like just trying to figure out, refunds and just getting numbers around it. It's actually really tough to even understand between refunds, cancellations, because they kind of handle in the same flow. How do we dictate and how do we know, like, what's the time frame? One of the things that's come up, and I'm not going to say bitten me in the butt, but it's like it gives me a bit of heartburn, was in discussions with Airbnb and VRBO and Expedia, because I'm in pretty readily, in contact with my reps. Some of the things that had come up are like, hey, your cancellation policy is too strict. And I looked at it and I'm going, our cancellation policy is really not strict. It's not the strictest policy. And they keep trying to urge us to push to the most flexible cancellation policy possible. And I'm going, man, it's just, that opens us up for all sorts of fraud issues, especially if that cancellation policy is so late. So I'd love to see if there's any kind of stats that showed, like, hey, I've got a relaxed policy. Like, what does that mean from a cancellation, from a fraudulent booking perspective? What does that mean? So I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that, but I haven't.
I've never correlated the two. I have my own beef with the OTAs and how they set up their cancellation policies. Our rates are the lowest directly on our website, but we have the strictest cancellation policy at 60 days. So if you want to book on Airbnb, you're going to pay a little bit more money. But unfortunately, we have to go with their cancellation policies, which are, while we do have options, we're at 14 days right now, just trying
Right.
to fill the books.
14, you're 100% to 14, or you're 100% to
Yeah.
30?
We're
100% to
100% to
14.
14. Yeah. The only place that really bites me in the summer, it's not that big of a deal right now, is when an Airbnb guest makes a booking for Christmas or New Year's and they're booking a larger home that takes a while, that takes, multiple families to book together and coordinate their schedules. And then they cancel 14 days in advance. So on December 10th or whatever that is, they suddenly cancel on me and it's very, very difficult to fill that house.
Right.
So I wish we could do like loose cancellation policies for certain seasons and then stricter during our holidays or our ski season or far out. Anything after 180 days, let's change our cancellation policy because it is hard to fill a very large, chalet at New Year's last minute, 14 days in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does bring a good question around just controls set on different properties. And it's the more properties you manage, the tougher it gets. But it's one of those where 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, probably smarter to have a relaxed policy on versus like you're saying, 7, 8, 9 bedroom properties or larger that generally, book 180 days in advance. So yeah, that's a good call out for sure. The one thing and I'm just kind of going through some of these pre-written questions and we kind of popped in and out of a lot of them. But, when we talk about protection for hosts, Airbnb and VRBO, do platforms like Airbnb and VRBO actually protect hosts in chargeback situations? And to be honest, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I have never had an Airbnb guest do a chargeback. So I've never run into it. I guess in the 4,000 bookings I've done on Airbnb over the last 10 years, I have heard and read that their terms and conditions are changing and they will not be responsible for chargebacks. I think chargebacks with Airbnb are probably rare. There is more dispute complaints and mediation around, can they have a partial refund or will you refund 2 nights? And if they're truly unhappy, I usually give them an ultimatum that says, you just checked in. This isn't the place for you. You're unhappy. If you leave before you stay your first night, I'll give you 100% refund. And typically they'll be like, no, we'll stay. Sometimes you have to feel them out and see, and if they're just trying to get, squeeze you for money or if there's a legitimate complaint or problem.
Right.
So I usually work with Airbnb and try and cooperate as best as I can and determine if it's reasonable, if they actually have, a legitimate problem or if they're just being a pain looking for money. But typically Airbnb, I mean, I've been pretty fair over the last 10 years and Airbnb typically sides with us and says, you're right. This guest
That's
is,
That's not my experience, but that I'm a little bitter about it. But yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those where I, again, like even the chargeback concept with Airbnb, it's almost like they don't need to get a chargeback because Airbnb is going to give their money back regardless, and then just take it back out of yours. And
I've only run into that once. We do have pretty lengthy descriptions in Airbnb, and in our PMS software, we have a general description, and then we have a customized Airbnb description and a customized VRBO description so that we can specify certain things for those platforms. And we spell everything out from mice, bats, mosquitoes, to slow Wi-Fi, no cellular, snow, ski area closures. So it's very difficult for a guest to claim, I need a refund because of this, or this was a problem, when we've disclosed absolutely every issue that could possibly come up. And we try to be brutally honest on the front end. You know what? Our Wi-Fi is slow. We're currently operating on DSL. We have no cell phone service in the area. You have to use the slow Wi-Fi. You may not be able to stream movies. And we just disclose everything so that we set the expectation of this is what you're walking into. You're not walking into downtown Seattle when you're running Wi-Fi on, 3 gigs or whatever it is. So I think if you set the expectations, that it's very difficult for them to come back and say, I want a refund. I had a problem. This is, and right now what I'm running into is certain properties don't have AC, and it's been unseasonably warm here the last 2 weeks. I love it. It's been in the 80s, but we are, at the base of a mountain and there's very little wind and we don't have the marine air coming in. So people are hot, and we offer fans. We tell them to open windows at night to bring in the cool air. We kind of explain that it's 2 to 3 weeks a year. A lot of the properties don't have AC up here, but as long as we disclose it in the listing, we try to set an honest expectation so that
See,
they
that's the
don't
hard part, because it's one
whine
of
too
those
much.
where you look at what you're supposed to put in a listing, right? And there's all sorts of classes about how you write a listing that's supposed to sell, it's supposed to pop.
Yeah,
And then it's
I
like,
know.
yeah, but you have to disclose everything as well. So all of a sudden it's like, here are all the
Everything.
reasons you don't want to rent this
Yes.
property. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's tough. It's just such a tough balance between the two, because even as things, my operations manager and I always have this kind of back and forth discussion, because she's like, well, you have to disclose this. And it's like, one of the disclosures is, when it snows, the roads are hard to drive up unless you have 4-wheel drive.
Yes. So we require guests to have 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive in the wintertime. We totally disclose it. They're in private gated communities. They aren't always plowed. We provide snow shovels, and we just lay it out and let them choose. And hopefully the pictures and all the other amenities and, good things about the property shine brighter. Fact is, they could show up in the middle of February on a holiday weekend and run into a snowstorm. We're at a ski resort. It happens. So we lay it out there
and
and
that
let them
happens in
choose.
Island Park all the time. I mean, we run
Yeah.
into snowstorms in the middle of June. So it's like, I mean,
And
that's true.
you get more snow. You get deeper snow than we do. I mean, we get a lot of snow up at the ski resort, but we're at lower elevation where the properties are. So it's a little bit easier to manage. But we still run into a lot of frozen pipes and a whole lot of ice. Ice on everything. So slip, trip, and falls and all that is a huge concern for us in the wintertime.
Right. No, and that makes sense. That makes sense. And again, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm just gripping on too hard and I don't want to let it go. It's like, come on, man. Like, you know where you're going. Like, you're literally researching coming here. But it's true, right? And you have to abide by
until
the
they've
rules.
been in the middle of a storm with a power outage and 3 feet of snow, they will never understand. You can tell them and describe it all you want. You can disclose it and put it on a listing, but until they're in the middle of the storm, they won't. They just won't comprehend it.
No, that's a good point. And we also have a lot of foreign tourists that come into it. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel bad, because we'll have, some folks that maybe come in from China or Taiwan, and they'll be, pulling into Idaho Falls and like the biggest ATV, like, the biggest truck rental that they can buy. Like, they've never driven anything, bigger than a 2-door car. It's like, oh, yikes.
So just disclose it, because you know what?
Yeah.
They read every sentence, and they will use, you said this and you said that. And, as long as it's in the listing and they're prepared.
Yeah, those aren't the folks that usually are the ones getting refunds. Like, those, they're actually some of our better guests, believe it or not. They bless their hearts. I appreciate them wholly. But a lot of people come out to Island Park for the shock factor too. I was elk hunting. I think I told you this story before. I was elk hunting and I was walking around. I still had my firearm on my hip. We were in the grocery store and there were 2 other elk hunters in there and we all had our guns on our hips. So the tourists that were there, I could tell because they're from Taiwan. And the looks on their faces, and it's like, that's why they go. Like, that is like the closest to the Wild Wild West they're gonna get. It's like these guys walking around with big handguns on, and then they walk out, and of course the guy with the biggest handgun had the biggest truck that literally I think he had to have like a step ladder to get into. It's just obnoxious. But I mean, it's not that bad in Island Park. I literally drove my Volkswagen Atlas up the mountain. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it's just funny. It's like, how do you balance that out without still maintaining a selling posture? And again, that's
Absolutely.
where it's like,
And you're walking a high wire between taking care of your property, representing your owner, taking care of your guest, trying to make money, trying not to piss off your guest, looking for a 5-star review. Every single one is walking the fine line of being the perfect host, having the perfect property, hoping nothing goes wrong, and making your owner as much money as possible.
do you feel that it's more, so this, again, the water gets murky when we start talking about the OTAs, right? And I love beating up on Airbnb, but they're not as, I don't know if I would say they're the worst or they're the best or whatever they might be. They're all kind of the same because, you're battling with every competitor in the field, right? Because you're putting one property up against other properties. So
Sure.
all of that matters. But when you're looking at your direct booking site, maybe your listing doesn't have to have as much, as long as like your site and your Q&A on your township, like as far as like, hey, this is our city page. If you're coming to Island Park, this is what you need. And then in the listings, you'll be able to refer back to, please check your city page for, things that you need to know. I don't know. I mean, if that makes a difference or not, but if it's your direct booking site, it seems like you have a little more leeway.
Yeah. And I think it also depends, when we talk about chargebacks or anything like that, what you're putting in your rental agreement. Our rental agreement is a little bit lengthy. People kind of complain every now and again that it's too long, but it is very detailed. And we do talk about inclement weather, power outages, being in the national forest where we have, bears, raccoons, and bats, and all the power outages and no cellular service. But we disclose it in our rental agreement. And I had to present that rental agreement to Amex when we did our most recent chargeback. And that, really is what saved us, that we
Hmm.
disclose everything. And if they don't want to sign the rental agreement, they're like, nope, I don't want to go anywhere that, could have a possible power outage. Then, okay, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
And that's important to know. I mean, there are some people with medical conditions and things like that maybe they absolutely they can't be around somewhere without power, or they need to know that power might be down. Otherwise, they can't run some medical device or something along those
Sure.
lines, which is
Yep.
completely understandable.
Yeah, and I think guests need to read listings also. Sometimes they forget. I forgot to check and see if it has a generator. I forgot to see if if it has a landline, because only half of our homes have landlines because a lot of people use talk over Wi-Fi on their
Right.
cellulars. Air conditioning right now, only half of our homes have air conditioning. The newer homes do, and the older homes typically don't. So they just expect that every single property has air conditioning, even though it's specifically listed that it does not. It's also educating guests too to please read all the amenities, everything about the listing, everything about the property, because every single one is different.
Right. Right. So here's another question for you, because it's something
Mhm.
that's brewing in my mind. At what point does it, like, how much time and energy do you spend arguing, negotiating, whatever with guests before you finally make a decision?
Very little, 5, 10 minutes, a few back and forths. But I gather information, I document where it was in the listing. Oftentimes, they don't want a phone call. They'll text because confrontation. A lot of people don't like confrontation now. I'm happy to jump on a call with someone, but typically they're, a keyboard warrior and firing off texts all the time. So I'll just screenshot the listing, pop it in, circle the policy and say, right here, it says we have very little Wi-Fi, or here's the megabytes on the speed test, or here's where it says we don't have AC. And I put it right back on him and say, here's the documentation. This is what you rented. This is what you agreed to. I'm sorry you missed the fact that it doesn't have AC. I'll bring you fans, but I can't issue you a full refund because
Right.
you didn't read the listing.
Right.
So we try to back everything up with facts and say, here's what it is. Here's your screenshot. I circled the policy. I circled the amenity. And I just put it back on them that it's hard to complain about something when it's spelled out in the listing.
Got it.
And I always do it on the listing where they booked. So if they booked on Airbnb, I screenshot, the Airbnb, clause or rule or that listing. If they booked on Verbo, then I go to the Verbo listing so that they can't say, "Oh, well, that's on your website," but I booked on an OTA. So I go to the platform where they booked and make sure that I didn't miss anything.
Got it.
But it's hard. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. I mean, it's constant.
Right. Right. It is for sure. And it's interesting because as I think through, the I just have so many of the instances that are happening, and I always make it sound like there's so many. Like, we don't have that many. I mean, don't get me wrong.
No,
Like,
but
I think we're up to
those
like
are the
number
ones you
4 for the
remember.
summer, right? Yeah, exactly. And and I have homeowners, and I don't know why, but it always just seems to be the same properties. And it has nothing to do with the property. And the homeowners are like, what in the heck is going on? Like, why am I dealing with this again? And it's like, it's not you, man. It's not us. It's just random. Like the power, I actually was with one of my favorite homeowners today, and she was going to tune into the podcast. So, Lynn, if you're hearing me, I'm talking about you right now. And terrific. She's awesome. Park City, Utah. It's just a wonderful, wonderful person. But, it's just like we've had 2 complaints where we had to deal with reviews. Fortunately, there weren't any chargebacks, and we didn't really have to give any refunds, I think, on either one of them. But it was just the 2 times. It was like, 1, a breaker burned out, right? And you're going, well, okay, that's just kind of bad luck. And then 2, a guest called in, and it just happened to be, it wasn't a shift changeover, but it was one of our overnight staff who were covering emergency calls, had to take her kid in, and she was new, so she didn't hand the duties off. She had to take her son into the hospital for I don't remember what it was. It wasn't anything emergency. It was just, kid emergency.
Sure.
like fell off the bed or something and thought maybe he broke his arm. But it was one of those where it was like, then that call didn't get answered. And then the next day, customers just absolutely livid, right? Like nobody cares about me and all this kind of stuff. And it just
Mhm.
happens like the 2 times it happens, it's just what happened to Evelyn's property. And it's like, really? Like, come on, man, like really the same property. It just happens. It happens. And
It's happened to me too. It's happened to me too. And you just deal with it the best we can. We usually apologize. We'll give them a card and a bottle of wine, or you can do charcuterie board or bottle of cider, something to say, I am so sorry. We did not do this intentionally. Here's a little apology from us, and just,
so when you do that,
how
how
can we
often
help
do
you?
you get yeah, thanks for the bottle of wine, but I'd still want half my stay refunded?
It's rare. It's rare. Not very often will so after you apologize and bring them a charcuterie board or a bottle of wine or whatever that is, and you're showing up at their door with this and a sincere apology. It's not very often they have their hand out and they say more unless it's a legitimate problem. If it's a larger problem, we'll transfer them to another property if it's available. Fortunately,
Right.
we do have a lot all in the same area. But, I would say 9 times out of 10 that solves it. It doesn't escalate very often for us, and I try not to let it, escalate. So I try to address it up front immediately as quickly as possible with, a little bit of compassion, put myself in their shoes and give them a concession or an apology or whatever that is and move on so they can, finish off their vacation without dwelling on, I want my $100 back, or I want my stay refunded or something like that.
Got it.
If they
Got
want
it.
their stay refunded, if they want their stay refunded, it's a big ass problem. They have no power, or there's a
Right.
massive problem with the property, which is extremely, extremely rare. So I would say that comes around maybe once every 5 years for us.
What about
I
like a
think if
cleaning
you
miss? A bed doesn't get made.
ooh,
There's hair in the whatever, the drain.
we send housekeeping out right away to take care of it. If they check in at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and they notice something, then we'll take care of it at 8 o'clock the next morning. And then we have up to the amount of their cleaning fee as a discretion. And I let my staff choose this also to give them a concession for it. So if they have a $200 cleaning fee, depending on how big the problem is, they can have up to $200 back in order to make them happy.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That makes sense. Yeah. So it's still cleaning fee-esque. And that's something where, we try to balance that. And it's just a different kind of interesting when we have people that say, no, that cleaning fee is just not enough. I had to wash these sheets. That cleaning fee's
Mhm.
not enough. It's like took you 10 minutes. At any rate, so yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on, Tara. Again, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. If you had the last parting advice for a new PM or a new, anybody doing even a DIY, what would be your advice to really avoid that first chargeback? What's the magic ticket?
Address the issue immediately, as quickly as possible. Get in front of it before it becomes a problem. Typically, 9 times out of 10, you can solve it before it becomes a chargeback. If it's your fault, acknowledge it and apologize. An apology goes a long way. We all make mistakes. We're all human. It happens. Even I have to sometimes say, I am so sorry. We messed up. How can I make it up to you? Sometimes I even let them, can you stay an extra night? Can you come back for another weekend? Can we have a do over? Something along those lines. I think if you get in front of it and you address it with, some empathy and honesty, you can solve 95% of your problems.
Excellent advice. I appreciate that. Well, folks,
Yep.
that's all for today. Thank you for joining VRNation Station. We appreciate you being here. If you would please like or follow, rate, give feedback. If you're not a fan of my sunburn or this non-shaven face, please feel free to fire off in the comments. Any feedback is always appreciated, as always. And Tara, thanks so much again for spending some time with me. I look forward to seeing you again.
Welcome y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation. VRNation Station, tune in and feel the thrill.